talk about this before, and yes, and I totally agree with you that culture, you don't just teach the language.
Oh yeah, you cannot take culture outside of language. They have to be connected.
I agree. So let's see, what do you have to tell us about the comprehensive input?
Okay, so I wasn't thinking about comprehensible input as a method. I was thinking it as of it as a foundational guiding principle. But our colleague Kathy Schock mentioned comprehensible input and that she'd like it included, and I said, yeah, okay, let's go ahead and include it. So to me, there are 4 guiding principles to language acquisition, all right? The first we talked about a little bit with total physical response. That's silent period, where the students are kind of absorbing everything, and it's going to take them a while before they can make an utterance because they're kind of making sense of it in their mind. That's called the silent period. The second, which is related to the silent period, and we're going to talk about that more in depth with 2 other methods, this is called the effective filter. Now, a filter prevents things from getting to you, and the effective filter in linguistics terminology is that little voice inside your head that says, oh, I better not say arre out loud, I'm going to sound stupid. So the students shut down before you can get them to say anything. So we need to work on the silent period, which we have to respect. We have to give the students that time to parse things, okay? We need to respect the effective filter, which is the students shutting down. We got to try and get the students to lower that effective filter. The next guiding principle is N+1. N is the amount of language that you know, +1 is just a teeny bit outside of your comfort zone. So if you're working at N+0, that's the amount of language you know, and there's no learning going on. It may be boring for you. N-5, oh, you're bored to tears. There's absolutely nothing new going on. You're speaking baby sentences. N+20, you're frustrated. You can't understand anything, and you shut down just out of frustration. So N+1, N+2, just a teeny bit out of your comfort zone. Comprehensible input, to me, is another guiding principle. You want to make sure that every word you're teaching makes sense, okay? That there's some way to understand it. You're learning it and you comprehend it. That's comprehensible input. And really the best way to do that is through reading, because all the words are connected to each other. But it also means you're using all kinds of mnemonic strategies. You're using the keychain method where you don't teach the word dog and the word skyscraper. You have to put them together somehow. Teach all the food words at once, teach all the clothing words at once, teach all the color words at once, teach all the conjugations of a verb at once. So, and whatever weird connections you can make, just keep it so that everything is understandable and nothing's being taught in a bubble. That's comprehensible input.
That's creating a network, neurological network of sense.
Exactly.
And how about the audiolingual method?
Okay, the audiolingual method has been around a really long time. And you start with a script. So you've written a script or you found a script, usually with 2 people. And what you do is you go through choral reading with your class, the script. And you've got the students repeating everything, and maybe they don't understand all of it because you're entirely in the target language. But let's say you've got a really complicated sentence in the script. You're like, I come from Alabama with a banjo on my knee. And you have the students repeat that, and the students kind of stumble over it. So then you break the sentence down. I come, and the students repeat, I come. I come from Alabama, and the students repeat, from Alabama. I come from Alabama with a banjo, and maybe the students stumble again, so you break it down even further, with a banjo, and you draw a picture, or you have a prop or something.
Is that Daddy Yankee? Is it?
You just gotta break it down for them, okay? Then once they have the whole script, maybe you read person A and have the class repeat person B, and then you swap it so that everyone's working with the script. Okay, now you get to do the really fun stuff where you're really picking it apart, and you do substitution drills and transformation drills. So a substitution drill is where you take the sentence and you change out a word. So I come from Montana with a banjo on my knee. I come from Alabama with a banjo on my elbow, or whatever. You just put it in. Transformation drills are, you're going to be changing the sentence to, usually you're inflecting the verb somehow. I came from Alabama with a banjo on my knee. I will come from Alabama with a banjo on my knee. Alabama is where I came from. All right. So, and then it gets really tricky because sometimes you want to take out 2 or 3 things. And then you get the students to talk to each other. Do you come from Alabama with a banjo on your knee? No, I come from Montana with a piano on my elbow. And you can really play with the script and everything. And it's a lot of fun.
That sounds so much fun.
They're all fun. A little bit of everything is fun.
Yeah, and it also connects with the comprehensible input.
And they should all. Any method worth its salt has to have respect for the silent period, lowering the effective filter, working at n+1, and using comprehensible input. Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Let's talk about the communicative approach.
Okay, the communicative approach. The main philosophy behind this is that social context is the most important factor in learning a language. The whole reason to learn a language is because of the social context. That the speaker and the listener are constantly negotiating meaning.
I like that.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's a different approach. It's very interesting. You give a brief text to the students, and the text should have repeated grammatical points that you want them to work on. And the teacher's going to ask in the target language for the students to paraphrase the text. So, you know, they'll circumlocute, they'll talk around it, they'll use other words. And the really fun part is all the role play that goes on with this technique. Generally, the role play is going to be a little lopsided in power because you're negotiating the meaning. So we've got usually like...
Oh, you are there, sorry.
Oh.
Okay, let's take a pause.
Okay.
So I probably will have to fix this, but yeah, so you were telling me about the communicative approach, and you said it was like very fun, and then it can like... Yeah.
All right, let me start again. I'll just start from the top. Okay. So the main tenet behind the communicative approach is the social context and this negotiation of meaning between the speaker and the listener. So you have a brief text that you give to the students, and they paraphrase the text. So it's all in the target language. You always want to work in the target language as much as possible, except for the grammar translation method. That's the only one. But you're working in the target language, and you have the students paraphrase the text, use other words to talk about the text, use whatever words they can. And then the really, really fun part about this is all the role play you get to do. Usually there's an imbalance of power because you're working with this concept of you're negotiating meaning between the speaker and the listener. So you'll either give your students something very structured or something very unstructured, where you're like, oh, you're the boss of a company, and you, Bob, you're an employee, you want a raise, talk to your boss and try to get a raise. You're the teacher, Sarah, and Fred, you're the student, talk to each other and say you want less homework. So it's that kind of negotiating of meaning. Then there's a lot of games with this method. The more games you play, you lower that effective filter. The effective filter that's going to make the student shut down before they try to do anything. Because when you're playing a game, you're not paying attention to how you sound, you're just trying to win the game, right? So whenever I'm inventing a game for this, I use the mnemonic. I don't know if you know the rhyme, who stole the cookie from the cookie jar? Who stole the cookie from the cookie jar? I think that in my head. Because who stole the cookie? There's an information gap. You need to figure out who did it, okay? What's that information? And then there's a choice the students have to make. Is it Bob or is it Mary? Okay, so then they say, Mary stole the cookie from the cookie jar. That's their choice. So we've got information gap, choice, and then you need feedback. Feedback is who, me, yes, you, couldn't be, then who. So I put that in my head so that whenever I'm making a game, I just run through that and then I can come up with stuff.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. So let's talk about the community. Oh, I have a slide here.
Oh, yes.
Community language learning. Let me share this. Okay, here we go. What's that about?
So I just threw together a little graphic with clip art because I just wanted you to envision students sitting in a circle. So again, community language learning is one of those methods that deals with lowering the affective filter. That is the main thing. We've got to get that affective filter lowered so that the students will start using the language. So you think of yourself as being a language counselor, and the teacher is outside the circle. The teacher does not come inside the circle. Eventually, somebody in the circle is going to want to say something. They're going to say, I like pineapples. So the teacher goes around behind that student and like over their shoulder and teaches them how to say, I like pineapples. I like pineapples. And the student will repeat it as many times as he needs until he feels like he's got it. Now, when he's got it, okay, when I first started 100 million years ago, we used tape recorders with cassette tapes in them. But now it's so amazing because we've got cell phones and we've got computers that can immediately record things. So you hand the student some kind of voice recorder, and the student says into it, I like pineapples. And they make sure that the student is happy with how that sounds, okay? Mm-hmm. Then somebody else will say, me too, I like pineapples too. So you go around behind that student and you say, me too, and you coach them how to say that line. And maybe somebody else will say, did you see that movie about pineapples? And you go behind them and you lather, rinse, repeat until everybody has said what they want to say. And you've got a script to work from. Okay, now at this point, the teacher gets to go into the middle of a circle. But all the teacher's doing right now is validating the students. The teacher does not do any language teaching at all in the middle of the circle. The teacher says, how do you feel about this? And I guarantee you the students are going to say, I don't remember what I just said. And the teacher's like, that's okay. You were focused on the conversation, and that's what we want. Because the conversation is most important. So then you can play back the tape for them, and everyone will remember what they said, and that you'll be able to put it on the board. You write it on the board, and then you can piece it together, and then you can play with it just like it's a script for any of the other methods. So that's community language learning in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm.